Hello everybody. I've recently discovered some more problems with upgrading to the Sony a6400 that I'd like to share with you guys today. Specifically, we're going to talk about using my existing A-mount ecosystem with the new a6400. So I want to start off by saying that I've always been a fan of Canon. Though I'm ashamed to admit that now with the recent announcement of the EOS RP. You know, I used to own some Canon point-and-shoot cameras, and I really liked the first one I had, because even though it was like this cheap little thing, it still had enough manual control features that made me feel like I was being creative with my photography. You know, I remember it had manual focus, so I really enjoyed that, and I think that was probably what really got me into photography, was playing around with all those manual features in a small point-and-shoot camera. And then since then we had a couple of other small Canon point-and-shoot cameras, but those were basic ones where the portability was its main appeal. I also had a friend in residency who shot Canon and was very good at convincing me that Canon was like the best ecosystem to get into because of all the great glass that you could get for a fairly reasonable price. However, when I entered the market looking for a DSLR camera, what I noticed was that Canon was not really innovating. They didn't come out with anything that was exciting or new. Whereas with Sony, they had just released the SLT camera. For those of you who don't know what SLTs are, they were basically the in-between camera between like a mirrorless camera and an SLR. It allowed you to use live view like a mirrorless camera, but have fast autofocus like an SLR. So for the time, it was quite a big deal. And it was because of this SLT technology that I went with Sony. In the end, I got the Sony Alpha 65, and that was maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. So now I'm in the market for a new camera, and lo and behold, Canon came out with the M50, which really caught my eye. Like, it was the most excited I had been about a camera in a long time. The reason being that it was a very affordable camera that had pretty good autofocus, and it was a mirrorless camera, and you know, I've been looking to get into that mirrorless ecosystem. Let's be honest. 2018 marked the death of DSLRs. Okay, 2018 saw the three top camera companies, Sony, Nikon, and Canon, all go full frame mirrorless. So I predict that DSLRs are probably going to die. So I'm looking to get into the mirrorless system, and the M50 looked like a great candidate. And I was very excited to get back into that Canon ecosystem. You know, the thought of adapting Canon, existing Canon lenses onto the M50 seemed really exciting. And I almost pulled the trigger and almost bought it over the holidays. But for reasons that I won't get into in this video, I kind of held back. And then, lo and behold, the Sony a6400 was announced. And now I'm eyeing the a6400 as my potential next camera. I've said before that that camera has its problems. You know, it has a stupid flip screen and it doesn't have in-body stabilization. But I also admitted that it was a pretty awesome camera. And despite the problems, there was some advantage, or I thought that there was some advantage to staying with Sony because I have Sony gear. And I thought that by staying in the ecosystem, in the Sony ecosystem, that I could use some of my existing gear. So let's talk about the gear that I have right now. So first off, I have this 16 to 50 millimeter f2.8 crop center lens. It's a great lens. The focal range is so useful, and it is on my camera 99% of the time. f2.8 isn't that fast, but it's fast enough, and it's a constant aperture 2.8. So this was a great lens. And the last I checked online, I think this thing was going for about $800 new. The next piece of gear that I have is this. This is the 85 millimeter f1.8 from Sigma, and it's a beautiful piece of paperweight that sits on my desk most of the time. I'm only half kidding. This lens is great. It's great for portraiture and stuff, but I got it thinking that I would shoot more portraits, but I just ultimately found that 85 millimeters is a very difficult focal length to use unless you are shooting specifically portraiture, and you spend most of your time outdoors. But I have this, and it is a full frame lens, and it would be nice to continue using this lens on the a6400. The last time I checked online, this lens was going for about $900 new. And finally, the last piece of Sony gear that I have is this Sony HBL f43M flash. I got it because I was looking to get into flash photography, and the last time I checked, this thing was going for about $400 new. So if you look at all of these pieces of gear that I have, I'm holding over $2,000 worth of Sony gear. Now they're all meant for the Alpha system, Sony Alpha 65, but I thought that by going with the a6400, I'd be able to make use of all of these. With an adapter, sure, but these wouldn't go to waste. So everything's honky-dory, right? I could just use all of that stuff. Well, actually the answer is no. Well, not completely no. You can use that gear on your a6400, but it works so poorly. Why would you want to? So let's start by talking about the lenses first. So in order to use A-mount lenses on an E-mount camera, you need an A-mount to E-mount adapter. Okay, and so Sony has a few of them. LAEA 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 are for crop sensors, and for the most part we can forget about them because I don't think Sony is making that anymore, because you can use the full frame versions of those just fine, and they actually go for cheaper, the full frame versions of the adapters. So we'll just talk about LAEA 3 and LAEA 4 today. I was originally looking at getting the LAEA 3 adapter for my alpha lenses, but the problem is using that adapter, you can't get continuous autofocus in video mode. So that's a no-go. So then the other option is the LAEA 4, and there are all kinds of problems with the LAEA 4. Oh God, where do I even start? So LAEA 4, what it does is it adds a translucent mirror to your E-mount camera, okay? And what it does is it diverts some of the light coming in to a phase detect sensor within the adapter. Does that sound familiar to you? It should, because that's exactly what an SLT camera does. So basically, if I were to use an LAEA 4, I would be converting my state-of-the-art a6400 to a 7-year-old Alpha 65 camera. I mean, if it still works fine, then what's the problem, right? Just use it, right? You lose about a third of a stop of light because of that semi-translucent mirror. What's a big deal, right? The problem is that the number of phase detect autofocus points in that adapter is the same also as my Alpha 65, which to me is insane. Like, why not have more points? Why not have more autofocus points? There's the Alpha 77, Alpha 99, and there are the Mark II versions of the Alpha 77 and the Mark II version of the Alpha 99, both of which have many, many more autofocus points, right? So if you're going to implement a SLT technology into that adapter, why not use like a better version of SLT? Why use the Alpha 65 version? I'm literally turning a 2019 camera into a 2013 camera. What's the point of getting the Alpha-6400 with its crazy awesome autofocus if it's just going to focus like my Alpha-65? But wait, there's more. If you use the LAEA4 adapter, if you want to use continuous autofocus in video, you can, but it stops the aperture down to 3.5, which means, again, it's exactly like my Alpha-65. So getting the a6400 and adapting my existing Alpha glass using the LAEA4 turns it into another Alpha-65. So obviously that's a no-go. I would have to stick with E-mount lenses. So now let's talk about the flash. I thought, well, at least I can use the flash, right? Sure, you can mount this flash onto the a6500 and use it just fine. I'm sure you can. The problem is, most of the time, I shoot with the flash off camera, and I think most people do as well. I mean, I look stupid doing it. I'm holding the camera like this and then the flash up here. But I think most people do that. They shoot with the flash off camera. And with my Alpha-65, when I'm shooting with the flash off camera, what I do is I use this pop-up flash as a wireless trigger for that flash. And so I naturally thought, well, the a6400 also has a pop-up flash, so I can use that as a wireless trigger for this guy. But if only life was that easy. So apparently the pop-up flash on the a6400 cannot be used as a wireless optical trigger. So I would not be able to use this off camera. So there you go. I have all this Sony Alpha gear that I was hoping that I could use with the a6400, but because they all work so poorly with the new camera that it's as though I don't own any of these. I have zero advantage from already being in the Sony ecosystem because none of that stuff will be usable with the a6400. So anyway, that's it. I hope this video is helpful to somebody out there who's looking to upgrade. The a6400 is a great camera. I'm sure the autofocus system will be amazing, okay? But if you own existing Alpha mount gear, don't expect to use it without some significant further investments and potentially many disadvantages. All right, see you in the next one.